in public service and help our constituents, particularly in Baltimore City. And thank you so much for having me and including me as a member of your advisory board.
Thank you, Madam President.
Mr. Solicitor, can I just pause 1 second? I just want to make sure we let people know. I think some folks had technical difficulties, so I wanted to let everyone know we are going to be recording this. We're going to start right now so that just in case anybody has missed it, they'll be able to access it later on. So thanks. Sorry.
Fine, thank you. That brings us to Dean Donald Tobin, University of Maryland Law School.
Hi, and thank you for having me here, Donald Tobin, and I'm the Dean of the Francis King Carey School of Law. The citizens of Baltimore made a decision in passing the law that the deans of the law schools would be members of this commission if appointed by the mayor and the president of the city council. And the mayor, Mayor Scott, and the president of the council, Mr. Mosby, have asked us to serve. So I see us as being asked by the people to do this as an independent voice and take that very seriously. Just as small background for people, I started my career in Baltimore City working for then Senator Paul Sarbanes. I worked for him for 8 years. I clerked for a judge in Baltimore City, Judge Francis Murnahan. And in 2014, I had the honor of coming back to the city to be dean at Maryland Carey Law. So as I said, I think for us, this is something that the people of the city have asked us to do, and I think I take very seriously being able to be part of having an independent inspector general. And I thank the mayor and the council president for appointing me.
Thank you. Finally, although by no means least, Dean Ronald Weich of the University of Baltimore Law School.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I haven't figured out how to rename myself on this platform, so you see me as R. Weich, but I'm actually Ronald Weich. I've been dean at the University of Baltimore School of Law since 2012. Immediately prior to that, I was an assistant attorney general in the Justice Department from 2009 to 2012, and practiced law before that. Like my colleague, Dean Tobin, I'm very pleased to serve the city in this manner. We are both law schools. I think we're very integrated in the life of the city, and are pleased to contribute to the civic success of our city. And if service on this board is helpful in that way, we're glad to do it. Let me just add one more thing, if I may, Solicitor Shea. Inspector General Cumming is a graduate of the University of Baltimore School of Law, and for a time she served on the Law School Advisory Council, which is, as would be suggested, an advisory group to the dean. When I was appointed to this position, she and I agreed that she should step down from that role. There's no compensation; it's simply an advisory role. But even so, we thought best to have that distance. So she is no longer a member of the advisory council, but she, of course, remains an alumna of the school, and just wanted to disclose that.
Thank you. Thank you. And we all had discussed that before, so I think all of that fitting and proper. Okay, let me just orient us, at least from my point of view, and we're truly a group of equals. So what I have to say is simply my opinion. I will try to recognize a consensus and make a judgment of the advisory board when those occasions occur. From my point of view, this advisory committee is to support the office of the Inspector General. We have several obligations, which I'll go over, but one of them, which is our most immediate task, is to review the performance of the Inspector General. In short, we are to provide feedback. I have found for myself and for those I have supervised via board membership or managerial position, that feedback is very, very helpful in performing the responsibilities of any job, particularly one that has a wide range of responsibilities like the Inspector General of Baltimore City. So I will ask this advisory committee to provide that feedback and to do it in a fair and even-handed way, and always with the goal of helping the citizens of Baltimore have a better, more transparent, more effective, and an inspector general with the highest level of integrity. So that's my goal here. Nothing more, nothing less. The charter requires us to do the following things. First, this advisory board appoints the inspector general. The current inspector general, as of November 2018, has a 6-year term. So that job of appointment is not on our current agenda. This board also has the obligation of removing the inspector general if that's necessary. And the grounds for any such removal would be persistent failure to perform the duties of inspector general, conduct prejudicial to the proper administration of justice, and let me just check the actual wording so that I'm not paraphrasing. Misconduct in office, persistent failure to perform the duties of the office, or conduct prejudicial to the proper administration of justice. The advisory committee also has the obligation of meeting at least once annually to review the performance of the inspector general. As you'll see from my vision of what we'll do here, we will certainly meet more than once in order to accomplish that review. And this advisory committee also is to review the budget of the IG, and I will talk about that at the end of our meeting today as the last item of business. The budget season has come and gone for this year. So what we'll be talking about will be a review for next year's budget. Now, as for the performance review, which is, I say, our most immediate task, what I thought I'd do was enumerate what I perceive to be the necessary tasks to do that thorough and fair and balanced review that we all want to do. I'm going to tick them off so you have a sense of the whole, but these are not written in stone. I would invite your comment, your amendment of any of these, a deletion if you think some should be deleted, and the addition of tasks that you think should be on the list. What we'll do then is, after we've agreed on what the tasks are, I will endeavor to create a sequential set of meetings in order to accomplish these tasks. Can't do it now because I'm not sure exactly what task we're going to end up with. And of course, I can't schedule them with 7 of us having busy schedules. That will have to be accomplished as we go. But here are the tasks that I think we should accomplish. First, we need to establish the ground rules for this advisory board. We are all absolutely focused on doing a thorough and fair review. Aspects of this, because it is a personnel review, must remain confidential. And whether or not the meetings are public, the discussions within this group, I would ask all of you not to try to carry them elsewhere by quoting members of the committee. I believe that a committee should discuss its business with each other and not carry messages outside the committee. So there is a level of confidentiality that we all need to observe. But the most important thing is to do that thorough and fair evaluation. And we should establish whatever ground rules that we think apply today, although that doesn't mean that we've stopped creating ground rules as they are needed. We're working on a blank slate here. The second task is to, in effect, gather or receive information to consider in evaluating the Inspector General. That will include, in my opinion, should include public input. I think we should have a public comment period that we publish and make known to people. And I think the comment that we get should be in writing. I think otherwise we're facing an unwieldy task, which is not likely to lead to the kind of rational, fair evaluation. So I think we need public input. We should have a public comment period, and we should ask that and consider only comment evaluation in writing. You all have been and will be asked or approached with information, opinions. You all, in one way or another, are public servants. You obviously should speak with the people that you serve and listen to them. But if that person wants input to this committee, it should come in writing, I believe, and not through the oral recitation of one of us of something they heard. Now, perhaps my legal experience of not finding hearsay particularly reliable leads me to this. So I admit there are other ways to do this. But we also will develop information about what the job is and how the job has been accomplished. Now, this could come in a variety of ways, but again, the product would be our own opinions and whatever we've got in writing in a document for our discussion. So that is an information gathering stage or task, if you will. I think we should, as a third task, I think we should have a full exchange with the current Inspector General, and to the extent she wants it, her staff. We should listen to what she presents to us and her staff presents to us. We should ask her questions and have a full exchange of information, because she knows more than any of us about what the job requires and what it entails. And we need to have a full and complete exchange with her. And we need the opportunity, of course, to ask her questions so we can delve into particulars that we think important. The next task is for this advisory board to meet and evaluate the data that has come to it, as well as the opinions that we all will begin to form, but I hope never come to any conclusions until we've had a full exchange with each other about the information that we've gathered. So and that evaluation meeting that we have should probably begin with what's the job exactly as we perceive it, because I don't know how we could evaluate someone if we weren't comfortable that we understood the job that that person was undertaking. What I would propose next as the next task is that the advisory board come to tentative conclusions or tentative feedback or tentative evaluation. And we should then have another meeting, I believe, with the Inspector General to give her and her staff an opportunity to react and respond to those tentative conclusions. Again, my experience has been that we all think and analyze and work and come to conclusions, and it's always wise to test them. And in this case, test them with the person who has not only the most knowledge, but the most at stake. So I think we should have that discussion post-evaluation meeting with the Inspector General, and to the extent she wants it, to her staff. And then the final task would be our report. I have no idea right now what form that might take, but we need a final product. I think it should probably be in writing, but I'm not even stuck on that. It could be an oral discussion with the Inspector General. I tentatively think it should be in writing, but right now, all I'm willing to say myself is that we should do a final report that has our conclusions. All of that will take a little bit of time and obviously several meetings. I would like to shoot for concluding all of this by sometime in September or at the latest in October. There's no requirement that we rush to any final judgment. We're supposed to meet annually. We're supposed to do a performance review, and the implication is that we're to do that annually. So we've got some time, but the issues that have surrounded the Inspector General, I think need to be, we need to have the air cleared in effect, and a prolonged period of evaluation, I don't think will help anybody. So we've got a lot to do, but I think we ought to keep it moving, and I will do my very best to accomplish that. Now, let me open all of that to your comments. And just to recap, we're going to establish ground rules. We're going to gather information. We're going to have an exchange with the Inspector General. We're going to evaluate the information that's come to our attention. We're going to come to tentative conclusions and have a final, in effect, final meeting with the Inspector General, all leading to a final report. So, any of you?
I'll go. Sounds right to me. I think that's a
Okay.
good list of tasks. A little bit daunting to think that we'd accomplish it all by September, October, but let's work hard and see what we can do.
Okay. Any of you want to speak, you can just raise your hand. Like I saw Councilman Costello gesture.
Thank you, Mr. Solicitor. I just wanted to share. I think that's a pretty sound approach. Makes sense to me.
Okay. It's probably wise for each of you to speak. I don't really particularly, my ego doesn't require consent from all of you, but I think it's wise for each of you to pitch in a little bit. Yes, Vice President Middleton.
I agree with everything you outlined. You clearly had goals and objectives for us and for the Inspector General, and I think this is a great start.
Okay. Donald?
So I too agree that this is a path that makes sense. I did have one question, and that was prior to this legislative and change by the people. The IG reported to the mayor, as I understand it. I'm not sure what kind of review happened then. In some ways, I think what we're supposed to be doing is taking the place of the review being done by a politician who maybe could be investigated. So what would have happened prior to this board existing?
Well, I am not particularly steeped in the history, but I do know that for a good period of time, including after the charter amendment, the Inspector General was part of the Department of Law and reported to the city solicitor at some point. And again, I'm not clear when she gained the independence that she now has. I don't know of any review that's been done of an Inspector in General. So like I say, we're working for a blank slate. On the other hand, we all know how to do evaluations, and so
if there was something or some framework or some rubric that was used in the past, it might be helpful for us to know it so that we can use something similar in the future. But I agree with your process.
Okay. Mr. Huber?
Thanks, Solicitor. Great point by Dean Tobin. But I want to join the chorus. Agree that this is a sensible way forward to do the work, which I think from the mayor's point of view, and I would echo that it's principally to provide the support that oversight, management, advice can provide to an executive like the Inspector General, and to provide a conduit for the public and for those to weigh in on this process. This is a very important position in city government. It's one that tends to garner a lot of public opinion, and in the scheme of Baltimore city government, it's still relatively new. And I think that your proposed way forward accomplishes both of those overarching goals, and I want to thank you for it.
Okay, Deputy Controller.
I also echo everyone's sentiments. Thank you again. I think the time frame, I think the process is actually laid out is actually very good. It's also very timely. You think of all the questions that have been going on across the country with the Inspector General. So I think it's great that Baltimore is using this process at this time. And it's also a public process. I think I'm appreciative of the timeline, of the tight timeline, and especially of the inclusion of a report out.
Okay, great. Well, for the first time in my life, 2 law school professors have not graded me down for work product. I'll take Dean Tobin's comments as simply supplementing. We dig up whatever we can on any prior evaluations. The second area to touch on is the budget review. Now, the charter in this regard has a number of aspects that we should pay attention to. The first, with respect to timing, is that our input, and we'll have to look closely when the time comes as to what our input is supposed to be. Our input to the budget is to come before the budget goes to the Board of Estimates, which I now know, and anybody who looked at it would know, is sometime in March or April of the year in question. So for us to have any input before it goes to the Board of Estimates, we would need to get the proposed budget in the January, February timeframe in order to have the ability to make meaningful comments on it. So I will work with the Inspector General to make sure we have a schedule that enables us to do that. I think, knowing just a little bit now, 1 year's worth of budget history, that is the time frame that all agencies typically get their budgets together. So I don't think this is an additional burden for the Inspector General. I think it's just an opportunity for that to happen. Now, we're lucky enough to have the chairman of the Council Budget Committee with us. So I'd ask Councilman Costello if there's anything I've said that's sort of off base there.
Thank you, Mr. Solicitor. No, I think that's spot on, as I'm sure most of our colleagues on this board would appreciate. Budgeting is pretty much a year-round process in Baltimore City. So a lot of the agency budgets are going to start being formulated in September for the next fiscal year. I think the timing you laid out seems to make the most sense. Thank you.
Okay. Right. And when the time comes, we should look closely at what this advisory board is supposed to do with the budget. There's some particular language, and I won't try to go through it now, but when the time is right, we should all take a look at it. And there again, we're going to have to figure out exactly what the job is and what we're trying to accomplish. So that's all I have to say on the budget review. Now, before we conclude, I do want to comment myself and then open to all of you the subject of a letter which we all received from the Inspector General last Friday afternoon. We got a letter that, in effect, without reading it, in effect, it challenges the composition of this advisory board, because it says each of the members either are or could in the future be the subject of an investigation. The letter points to 5 of the 7 of us, but the logic of the letter would include all 7, because the Inspector General has the authority not just to investigate elected officials and city employees and agency heads, but the Inspector General also has the responsibility of investigating any entity or persons that contract with or do business with the city, which would certainly include the University of Maryland and the University of Baltimore. So all of us fall within the rubric that was suggested in the letter, that because there is a potential of investigation of any of us or our agencies, that we shouldn't serve on the review committee. Now, this system was established and voted on by referendum in November of 2018. Before that, I believe, and the council members here can correct me if I'm wrong, the city council fully considered all of this in order to prepare the ballot for the referendum. So for a long time now, we have been dealing with the development of the Inspector General, which has always included an advisory board. The current Inspector General testified in favor of this charter amendment, and was very recently has commented that she welcomes a review. And at that point, there wasn't any reason, and there isn't today, any reason to believe that's a review by anyone other than us. So we are obligated to do this job by the law of the city. We don't have any choice. The only two people who have a choice are the deans of the law school. And while they haven't waived that choice, they have, at least for the time being, committed to work with us. Notwithstanding, and frankly, both of them brought up to me that the very conflict or potential conflict that is raised in the letter is, what about our ties to the city? We contract with the city. Is that going to be a problem? And we thoroughly investigated that. Indeed, we had a call with the chair or the director of the ethics group that is part of the Inspector General's office. And he fully cleared the participation of both deans, notwithstanding the fact that they could themselves potentially be the target of an investigation by the Inspector General. So we've got the job. We thoroughly have vetted it. The citizens of Baltimore have told us that we're to do it. And none of that can be changed without another referendum that would amend the charter in some way. If that should be done, and it's not our job to decide whether it should be done or not, that would be the job of the city council and then the voters of Baltimore. So until that's done, we've got this responsibility. And I am confident that we will not be swayed by the implicit or the implications of the letter that somehow we're unfit for the office. We are not. Now, if conflicts do develop, if in fact one of us or our agencies does become the subject of an investigation of the IG, we will take that up individually on an ad hoc basis, one by one, and determine what the best course of action. And the fact that if the University of Maryland, for example, was somehow under an investigation, that wouldn't necessarily disqualify Dean Tobin. It would depend on what's being investigated and why, and we'd need to have a full discussion of that. And I'm committed, and I'm sure you all are too, to take up any either real conflict or appearance of conflict that arises as we proceed with this evaluation. So that's my point of view on it. I welcome comments by any of you, and I won't require each of you to comment on this. I'll simply ask if any of you have something to say. Go ahead. Yes, Councilman Costello.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of things. I did want to provide clarification to a point that you made about what would need to happen in order for the composition of the board to change, and specifically that it could be an act of the city council through a mayor and city council resolution, which if enacted would trigger something going on the ballot. In addition to that, that could be triggered by 10,000 signatures. It could also be triggered by an act of the General Assembly of Maryland, which I knew you were aware of. I just wanted to point that out for some of the folks that are listening from the public. And I did want to note, you mentioned that the current Inspector General did testify in support of the current structure. Just by way of background for our colleagues and members of the public, Mayor and City Council Resolution 18 0199 was introduced in the City Council in March of 2018. That bill was voted on in the Judiciary and Legislative Investigations Committee, which I happened to chair at the time, I believe on June 19th of 2018. To the best of my recollection, the Inspector General did support the structure that was originally proposed by Councilman Dorsey, who initiated this process. So I would certainly be amenable at a later date if that was the direction that the chair wanted to go, to better understand where these concerns are coming from on behalf of the Inspector General. But I certainly defer to the chair of our board in this. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Solicitor.
Very, very helpful. And my comments needed the clarity that you brought to it. The resolution of the mayor and city council, I assume, would be effective upon passage, but still would have to be ratified in effect by a referendum. So ultimately, the choice is for the voters of Baltimore. Though you're right, there certainly could be an interim change via the resolution. To the extent that we need to delve deeper into what underlies these concerns, I think I'm sure you are too. We're ready to do that. If there are particulars that we need to examine, either on facts that are now extant or become evident later, we will. We will have plenty of opportunity to exchange with the Inspector General. So to the extent that these concerns are still ripe or ripening, we can do that during our exchange. So by no means am I suggesting this is the final word. The door is open for any assessment of this subject or any other. Dean Tobin?
So I guess maybe I want to affirm what you said and add a little bit. I mean, I think the Baltimore City and the people through the charter amendment made actually a big change for independence. This was a move from having the Inspector General report directly to a person who maybe had some risk, to a whole group of people, right? And part of what is a check on independence is each one of us. The idea that all of us will be investigated at the same time is very small. I think the idea that Dean Weich or I would be in an investigation are very small. We did, and I appreciate your noting for the record, request an ethics review of that, because we didn't want to join a board and then have a problem. And I think that we can have discussions with the Inspector General, but I think that part of that was in the context of, and she said so, in the Baltimore County situation, which was a very different situation. And I think that this idea of independence, it's very different if we are involved in a particular investigation versus an oversight of the entire office. And I think I can't speak for anybody else. I do not anticipate that we view ourselves as being involved in a particular investigation. I view ourselves as evaluating globally. So I think the city made a great first step that was designed to move towards independence, not the opposite. That should be recognized. And again, I think maybe to the chair, I think the understanding is that our job is not to micromanage the office, but our job is to look to make sure that the office is being run correctly and evaluate the work globally, not by case.
Absolutely. Very good. Others? Yes, Vice President Middleton.
Thank you. And I agree with I agree with everything that was said thus far. And just to add that I think all of us complete these ethics forms and update them every year personally on a yearly basis. So, we have other rules and guidelines that we follow to help with the process. So we are, as a board, we continue to do our personal things to stay within the guidelines of our personal ethical relationships.
Good. All right. Anything from anyone else on this subject? All right. I will take what we've discussed and turn it into what amounts to a work plan. And we'll go about scheduling the necessary meetings with an eye towards accommodating everyone's schedule. I anticipate beginning all of it now. Given my very tight time frame, we don't have a lot of time to waste. Not that anybody's interested in wasting time, but you're very busy people, and I'll do whatever I can, and my staff is superb. They will do whatever they can to move this along and enable you to get what you need when you need it, so that we can do our job. So with that, I'm about to close. So if there are any further comments for the good of the order, I certainly entertain them now. Very good. Thank you all for meeting and discussing, and I look forward to working with you. Take care.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stay safe.